Whatever your opinion on the Five Nights at Freddy's series and the fandom that comes with it, there isn't really any denying that Scott Cawthon started something big. But what he truly started wasn't a series or a franchise. Above all things, Five Nights at Freddy's started a whole new subgenre of horror. It opened up a new category for horror that hadn't been explored in depth before, because there wasn't a universal sense of generational trauma centered around monstrous animatronics coming to life to bring death and terror upon innocent bystanders. Our parents and grandparents might have had killer robots to represent their fear of mankind overrun by machines, but they didn't have robots created specifically for the purpose of children's entertainment, with their uncanny expressions and movements and their tinny, unnatural voices. By the time they were truly exposed to things like Charles Entertainment Cheese and all of his ilk, they no longer had the vulnerable mind of a child, so it never could affect them the same way it would us. So with one internet sensation, we were all reminded of a specific form of trauma, one that was almost universal, and a new movie monster was born. But it hasn't really been treated like that, and that bothers me. No matter how much you dislike the books, you would never hear anyone dismiss the Twilight series, or any story featuring vampires as a Dracula fan series, simply because it happens to have vampires in it. But for some reason, anything that has come out after Five Nights at Freddy's that has the same type of monsters is just titled by YouTube gamers and reaction channels as a Five Nights at Freddy's fan game, simply because it happens to be about animatronics. Granted, these games and series are obviously inspired by Five Nights at Freddy's, and the majority of them keep the same format and similar title, starting with insert number of nights with insert name of monster, and are a point-and-click style horror game. But aside from this, these characters and stories in these games have nothing to do with Freddy Fazbear or the Five Nights at Freddy's lore. You could point out that they're piggybacking off the idea, rather than being original, but the setting for animatronics is actually very limited. I think the two top places it would be realistic to set your story about one would be in an arcade or a theme park. So far, I don't know if anyone has gone in the theme park route, but to use my vampire example again, you can't say someone's vampire story is piggybacking off Bram Stoker because their vampires are also set in Transylvania. So, when someone like Martin Walls comes along, with something like the Walten Files, and shakes things up entirely by not only creating his own plot, but also by changing the format of how he presents his work as a lost VHS web series instead of the typical Steam game you'd typically come across, you can bet that I find his work being referred to as a fan series frustrating in how close-minded that is. Because I would argue that the Walton Files might be the best series to come from this newfound horror subgenre. And here's why. Martin Walls creates some of the most viscerally disturbing images you can hope for on a heavily monitored platform like YouTube. The Walton Files plays with the fear of the camera turn, or in the animated sense, waiting for the next frame. But I'm not here to talk about distorted expressions, uncanny movement and animation, even though that's all executed very well and is important to the horror aspect. No, what really knocks this series out of the park is its aesthetic. The Walton Files is meant to be VHS tapes from the 70s and 80s that have been stripped onto the digital format, and their creator sells this. The filters, the saturated colors, everything is reminiscent of the lost media genre that YouTubers like Blame It On Jorge and others would discuss on their channels. If you were just some schmuck who knew nothing about unfiction, you would be inclined to believe that these are real pieces of VHS media that somebody found and decided to share on YouTube. And that's not just a matter of grainy filters thrown on top of the video. The Walton Files does its best to recreate the way old cartoons or company orientation tapes might have looked. From cartoon title cards and their credits, to edited photographs made to look like the actual locations in the series. You know what the series is going for, and artistically it does this incredibly well. And like I said before, that doesn't even cover the horror elements. I will leave that for you to discover on your own, because if any of this sounds interesting to you, then you need to watch this series without anything spoiled for the full experience.
Now, allow me to introduce my friends. This is Billy. TVA.
Hello.
And the Pumpkin Rabbit.
Wow, it's pretty dark here. You should turn on the light. Turn on the light. Turn on the light. Turn on the...
Much like the visual aesthetic, the sound design creates the illusion that you are actually watching an old VHS. From the white noise in the background, the tinny music, the distorted audio, to the way that some things will skip and repeat. Not only that, but like Ari Aster with his movie Hereditary, Martin Walls knows the value of silence in building up dread. Music will suddenly cut off, leaving you with nothing but the faint buzzing of static where you hold your breath. The series does have its jump scares, but they're few and far between. Sudden silence and sudden loud sound is played less to shock, and more to give you the feeling that something is very off, or to heighten the tension, only to burst into climactic chaos when the build-up can't get any heavier. What happened to Jack Walton? The fate of the entire Walton family is the question that the Walten Files orbits around. And though never directly answered, there are plenty of visual and contextual clues given so the audience can come to their own conclusions. Because the story of the Walton Files isn't about a serial killer who murders children. The victims are adults, and what we can gather is that the events are a result of horror of horrors, a workplace drama, and maybe a little something of a family one as well. Specifically between upper management and the founders, Jack Walton and Felix Kranken. The clues are there. The fact that Walton goes missing and that his business partner removes him from one of the employee guides as if he never existed hints at his involvement, if nothing else. Especially when you're clued into the fact that all of Jack Walton's family, except for one daughter, have been vanishing one by one. Sophie Walton is the one who's in danger. We know that, and these clues and hints that force their way through the tapes make that very clear. Rather than outright telling a story, the Walton Files goes down the road of hints and clues, hidden in its lost media facade, much like Petscop or Catastrophe Crow. These tapes are most definitely haunted. The first couple of videos are a mixed bag of employee instruction guides and orientation tapes, found footage, a couple of small cartoons, but they're all off somehow. There's something manipulating them, trying to get a message out to someone specific. It's either a warning or a threat. Maybe both. The problem is, we don't have enough information to know if the danger is happening now, or has already happened. We're just outliers who stumbled on it. We're intruding. Since there are only 2 videos that are canon to the story, we don't have all the information of what is happening, or has happened. So for now, I can't speculate too much. On top of the 2 official videos, Martin has released 2 bonus videos, a Halloween special and a Christmas special, that he claims are not canon and just for fun. He might be telling the truth about that, but we'll see. Since the Bunny Smiles Corporation has in-universe merch, which includes cartoons, we can connect that these holiday specials are meant to be a product of the company, no doubt drawn by several tired, poorly paid employees, but at the very least they allude to the story events. Whether these were made out of spite or are also cursed or haunted is up to interpretation. Even if they have absolutely nothing to do with the story, I will say that The Mysterious House is my favorite video out of the entire series. It's a real spine-chilling, unsettling watch, and the way that it's given the exact same feel of an old cartoon special is phenomenal. I'm not a person who is usually scared, so the fact that the ending got to me is honestly very impressive. The Christmas special, Boozoo's Ghost, is based off of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, a story which is notorious for being adapted by many different children's shows, from The Muppets to All Dogs Go to Heaven, so it seems very fitting that the Bunny Smiles Corporation would have also jumped on that bandwagon. As for how it alludes to the main plot, I do have a theory. It could be completely incorrect, of course, but if I'm on my soapbox anyway, I might as well speculate. Since we don't know who, if anyone at all, occupies the Boozoo animatronic, it's very possible that a certain Felix Kranken might end up inside him in the future. And I say this because in Boozoo's Ghost, Buzu is a greedy, selfish jerk of a boss to Banny, who, as an animatronic in the canon series, had an employee's body stuffed inside after the disappearance of Jack Walton. So it would stand to reason that an animator at Bunny Smiles might have applied some wish fulfillment to their work of what they would like to happen to a boss they don't like, or if the tape is haunted, the victims are letting Kranken know what's coming for him. But that's just my theory. Now, for all my praise of this series, I'm not going to claim that it doesn't have a few flaws. There isn't anything out there that's infallible, and if I'm going to hype something, it's best to be completely honest. But as much as I think that the Mysterious House is the strongest episode in the series, Buzu's ghost is probably the weakest. It's not that it's bad, or had any less effort put into it. In fact, I'd argue it might actually have the most effort out of all of them. It's 30 minutes long rather than 10 to 15 like the rest of the episodes before it, and the pacing is much slower. There's an issue with the audio being so distorted in places that you can't understand what some characters are saying, which is more of a nitpick since that can be easily fixed by adding subtitles, which I'm sure will happen in the future. However, I think what really hurts the episode is its predictability. Because it's based off a well-known classic, excluding the dark atmosphere and twist, the audience already has a pretty good idea of what will happen, so the dread element isn't nearly as effective. We know he'll be visited by 3 ghosts, and they'll distort into something creepy and unsettling. Buzu whines a bit, the ghost characters bully him with cryptic messages, and then he dies at the end. Spoiler, I guess. It's not got the same build-up of anticipation and uncertainty as the previous episodes. And the idea is that you're supposed to hate Buzu for being a greedy and selfish old fart, but you mostly just feel sorry for him. The ghosts aren't really there to give him a chance at redemption, they're just kind of there to torture him. Honestly, the moral you could take away from it is, don't open Christmas presents that randomly appear in your house. I mean, you could interpret the story being that Buzu was murdered in his sleep by an angry employee and never woke up Christmas morning, and the events of the ghost visits was just his dying brain creating his own purgatory, but I'm getting off topic. The Christmas special's plot isn't strong, the pacing is slow. The suspense and dread isn't as effective, but mainly due to the fact the short is built around a very well-known plot. Still, it is entertaining, and that is what matters. I think if Martin Walls wants to branch out and have fun with his project, then more power to him. We can't make bangers every time, and if he's proud of what he makes, then that should be good enough for anyone. In the end, I sincerely am impressed by the series as a whole, and I hope that my review encourages more people to watch it. Because I seriously believe that this is a great addition to the animatronic horror subgenre. And it needs to be appreciated for what it brings to the table. The Walten Files was inspired by the giant that came before it, but it's done so much more to stand out. I really enjoy the Walten Files, and I hope that you will too.
Mr. Van W. King, Mr. Sneakfoot Pyro. I will sing you a song, and it won't be very long, about a maiden sweet, and she never would do wrong. Everyone said she was pretty, she was not long in the city, all alone, oh what a pity, poor little maid.